On a busy sidewalk, a man in an expensive suit sits on the curb, crying desperately after receiving the most devastating news of his life. Suddenly, a little beggar girl approaches, extends a piece of bread, and asks innocently, "Sir, are you crying from hunger too? I know what it's like, my tummy hurts too." The millionaire looks at this child, who despite having nothing, offers everything she has. What happens next is so unexpected that it leaves everyone at the scene in complete shock. The sidewalk of Fifth Avenue buzzed with its usual late afternoon rush when Robert Morgan, CEO of one of the country's largest construction firms, collapsed. His knees buckled, hitting the cold concrete, his cell phone slipping from his trembling fingers. The screen still glowed with the message that had just shattered his world. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Morgan. We did everything in our power, but Marina didn't survive the complications." Marina, his only daughter, his reason for living since he'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago, the 17-year-old girl who had been bravely fighting a rare autoimmune disease for over a year. The same girl who just that morning had smiled and said she was feeling better, that she'd be home soon. Tears streamed uncontrollably down his face, staining his $10,000 Italian suit. Robert didn't care about the stares of passers-by, the whispers, or his reputation as an unshakable man. In that moment, he was just a father, devastated by the deepest pain a human being can experience. The city's sounds seemed distant, as if he were underwater. His hands trembled so much he could barely see Marina's photo on his phone's wallpaper. A radiant smile, brown hair blowing in the wind, taken on her last birthday before the illness began to consume her vitality. "Mister," a soft, childlike voice cut through the fog of his grief, "do you cry from hunger too?" Robert lifted his face, tears blurring his vision. A small girl, no more than 6, stood before him. Her bare feet were dirty, her dress a little torn at the edges, but what struck him most were her eyes, large, brown, and full of a compassion he hadn't seen in a long time. The little girl held out a squashed piece of bread, probably her only meal of the day. "When my tummy hurts real bad from hunger, I cry like that too," she continued, her voice carrying a wisdom far too tragic for someone so young. The contrast was surreal. Here he was, a man who could buy virtually anything he desired, being offered the only food a homeless child possessed. The irony of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut, making his sobs intensify. "You don't have to cry, mister," the girl insisted, taking another step closer, the bread still extended in her small, grimy hand. "You can have half. I learned that when we share, the hunger hurts less." Robert tried to speak, but his voice failed him. How could he explain to a child that his pain wasn't physical? How could he say he had just lost the only person who still gave meaning to his existence? How could he confess that all his money, power, and influence hadn't been enough to save his daughter? The girl, interpreting his silence as hesitation, broke the bread in half with her delicate fingers. "Here," she said, offering him the larger piece. "This half is yours." The gesture was so pure, so devoid of ulterior motives, that Robert felt something inside him break even further. This child, who clearly had nothing, was willing to share the little she possessed with a complete stranger. Meanwhile, he had spent years accumulating wealth, building an empire, but in the end, none of it mattered. What's your name?" he managed to ask between sobs. "Sophia," she replied with a small smile, "but everyone calls me Fia." Sophia. The name meant wisdom, and there was something profoundly wise in that child's innocence, something that made him realize how far he had drifted from humanity in his relentless pursuit of success and control. A man in a black suit approached hurriedly. "Mr. Morgan, the car is waiting. We need to go to the hospital to—" His voice trailed off as he mentioned the destination. Robert rose slowly, his legs still shaky. Sophia took a step back, suddenly shy in the presence of the other man. The piece of bread was still in her outstretched hand, an offer of compassion he didn't have the heart to accept. "Thank you, Sophia," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "But keep the bread. You need it more than I do." As he was guided to the waiting limousine, Robert couldn't get the image of the little girl out of his mind. Amidst the searing pain of loss, something about that encounter had touched his soul in a way he didn't yet fully understand. What he didn't know, as the limousine glided over the asphalt towards the hospital, was that this brief moment would change his life forever. Sophia stood on the sidewalk, watching the car drive away, the broken bread still in her small hands, unaware that her act of kindness had planted a seed of transformation in the heart of a man devastated by grief. The night in the penthouse apartment was suffocating. Robert paced back and forth, his footsteps echoing on the Italian marble floor. The walls, once silent witnesses to his perfectly controlled life, now seemed to close in on him. In his hands, he held the last drawing Marina had made in the hospital, a simple sketch of a sunset, with the words, "Everything will be okay, Dad," written in her delicate handwriting. The clock read 3 in the morning, but sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his daughter's face. And now, mixed with Marina's memories, came the face of Sophia, that little girl from the sidewalk, with her bare feet and her impossible offer of kindness. His thoughts were interrupted by his cell phone ringing. It was Sandra, his executive assistant of 15 years. "Mr. Morgan, I'm sorry to call so late, but..." She hesitated. "The board is pressing for an answer about tomorrow's meeting, the merger with the Anderson Group." "Cancel everything," he cut in, his voice harsh. "Cancel the whole week." "But, sir, the investors..." "My daughter died today, Sandra." The words came out like shards of glass from his throat. "My daughter died, and there's a little girl on the streets of New York, sharing a piece of stale bread with strangers." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Sandra had never heard her boss, always so controlled and rational, sound so broken. "I'll take care of everything," she replied softly. "Get some rest, Robert." He hung up without responding. Rest. How could he rest when his entire life had crumbled? How could he sleep knowing he would never see Marina's smile again? How could he keep breathing when each breath hurt like 1,000 needles? Dawn found Robert sitting on the floor of Marina's room, exactly as she had left it the last time she was home. The bed was still unmade, a book marked on page 83 on the nightstand. On the mirror, sticky notes with motivational messages. "Today will be an amazing day. You are stronger than your illness." His eyes burned, but the tears had dried. In their place was a corrosive emptiness that threatened to consume him entirely. That's when his gaze fell upon the small silver cross Marina always wore around her neck, a gift from her mother before she passed. With trembling hands, Robert picked up the cross. Marina had insisted on leaving it at home before her last hospital stay. "Keep it for me, Dad. When I come back, I want to find it right here." She wouldn't be coming back. Never again. A sudden impulse made him stand up, not caring about his disheveled appearance, his rumpled suit from the night before. He went down to the building's garage. His driver, who was sleeping in the car awaiting orders, jumped startled when he tapped on the window. "Take me to 5th Avenue, same place as yesterday." The sun had barely risen when they arrived. The streets, usually crowded at that hour, were almost deserted. Robert got out of the car, ignoring his driver's protests about his safety. His eyes scanned every corner, every alley, searching for Sophia. After nearly an hour, he found her sleeping, on a piece of cardboard, huddled against the wall of a closed shop. His heart ached, seeing how much smaller and more fragile she looked in her sleep. The same tattered dress, dirty feet, a thin, torn blanket barely covering her small body. He approached slowly, trying not to startle her. That's when he noticed the marks on her arms, recent bruises, some still purplish, others already turning green. His hands clenched into fists. What kind of world was this where children slept on the streets and bore marks of violence on their bodies? Sophia stirred, her eyes slowly opening. For a moment she seemed frightened to see someone so close, but then she recognized Robert, and a small smile lit up her face. "Hi, crying man," she said, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Is your tummy still hurting?" The innocent question was like a stab to his chest. Before he could answer, a shout cut through the morning air. "Sophia! Where did you get to, you little brat?" The girl's smile vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of pure terror. She jumped up, quickly gathering her blanket. "I have to go," she whispered, already backing away. "Uncle Mike doesn't like it when I talk to strangers." Robert took a step towards her, but she had already disappeared into a nearby alley. Seconds later, a staggering man walked past him, yelling Sophia's name in a voice heavy with alcohol and anger. Standing on the sidewalk, Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: absolute helplessness. First his wife, then his daughter, and now this little girl who, amidst her own misery, had offered him solace. No, this time would be different. This time he wouldn't stand by, watching life snatch someone else from his grasp. With determined steps, he returned to the car and picked up his cell phone. "Sandra, I need you to contact our legal department and find the best private investigator in the city. I don't care about the cost." The pain was still there, as searing as before. But now there was something else, a purpose. The days following, Marina's funeral passed in a thick fog. Robert barely registered the condolences, the handshakes, the pitying glances. His mind was torn between the gut-wrenching pain of loss and a growing concern for Sophia. The private investigator, Paul Graham, had started his work immediately, but the initial information was disturbing. "Sophia Oliveira, 6 years old," Paul reported in his office. "Mother died 2 years ago. Father unknown. Lives with her supposed uncle, Mike Oliveira, 42. He has an extensive criminal record for public intoxication, vandalism, and assault." Robert pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to contain the wave of anger consuming him. "And Child Protective Services, social workers." A few reports were made by neighbors, but Paul hesitated. "The system is overwhelmed, Mr. Morgan, and Mike always manages to evade investigations, constantly changing addresses." The afternoon was fading when Robert returned to Fifth Avenue. This time he found Sophia sitting on the sidewalk, drawing with a piece of colored chalk on the concrete. His heart clenched when he saw she was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the heat, clearly trying to hide new bruises. "Hi, Sophia," he said softly, so as not to startle her. She looked up, a smile lighting her tired face. "Crying man, you came back." Robert crouched beside her, looking at the drawing on the ground, a house with a garden, a tree, and what looked like 3 people holding hands. "It's beautiful," he commented. "Who are they?" Sophia's smile faltered a bit. "It's a family. I saw in the park the other day. They looked so happy." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes I pretend I have a family like that." Her words were like daggers to his chest. How many times had Marina drawn houses like that? How many happy family drawings still adorned the walls of her now far too silent room? "Are you hungry?" he asked, noticing she seemed thinner than before. Sophia nodded shyly. Robert took her to a nearby diner, watching with a broken heart as she devoured a sandwich as if it were her first meal in days. And it probably was. "Sophia," he began carefully, "your uncle, does he hurt you?" The sandwich stopped halfway to her mouth, her eyes, once bright, filled with fear. "I can't talk about it," she murmured. "He gets really mad when I talk to people." "I can help." "You?" Robert insisted gently. "I have friends who can make sure you're safe, that you have food every day, that you can go to school." "School?" Her eyes widened with hope. "I've always wanted to go to school, to see the other kids with their colorful backpacks." The moment was brutally interrupted by a harsh voice Robert recognized from the other day. "Sophia!" Mike appeared at the diner's entrance, his eyes bloodshot with anger and alcohol. "What the hell is this?" Robert stood up, instinctively placing himself between Sophia and her uncle. "Mr. Oliveira, we need to talk about—" "I don't need to talk about a damn thing," Mike bellowed, grabbing Sophia's arm forcefully. "And you rich piece of crap, stay away from my niece or you'll regret it." Sophia let out a small whimper of pain, but didn't resist. Her eyes met Robert's one last time, full of silent desperation, before she was dragged out of the diner. Robert tried to follow them, but Mike turned with a threatening glare. "Try anything and I'll report you for harassment. Let's see how your reputation handles that, businessman." The people around watched the scene in embarrassed silence. Robert felt powerless, just as he had in the hospital, watching life leave Marina's eyes, unable to do anything. Back in his office, his hands trembled as he typed an urgent email to his legal team. "I need all possible legal options to obtain custody of a child in an at-risk situation. Urgent." The reply came an hour later, and it wasn't encouraging. With no blood ties, as a single man, and with his reputation as a ruthless businessman, his chances were practically nil. The system prioritized maintaining family ties, however precarious. That night, alone in his apartment, Robert held Marina's silver cross, silent tears streaming down his face. "Help me, honey," he whispered into the void. "Help me save her." What he didn't know was that his attempt to help Sophia had triggered a series of events that would make the situation even more dangerous. While the city slept, Mike Oliveira was packing his bags, planning to disappear with his niece once more, as he had done so many times before. And Sophia, huddled on her thin mattress on the floor of a dark room, clutched the diner napkin she had hidden in her pocket, her only memento of the man who had been the first to care about her since her mother had gone. The apartment where Sophia lived with her uncle was empty when Robert arrived with the investigator the next morning. The smell of mold and alcohol permeated the air, and the few remaining clothes were scattered on the floor. In the corner of the tiny room that must have been Sophia's, there was only a thin mattress and a drawing taped to the wall, the same house with a garden she had drawn on the sidewalk. "They left during the night," Paul reported, examining the place. "According to the neighbors, it's not the first time. Mike has a pattern. When he feels threatened, he disappears for a few weeks." Robert felt the weight of guilt crush his chest. His attempt to help had only worsened Sophia's situation. Now she was somewhere unknown, probably hungrier and more scared than before. "I have to find her," his voice came out choked. "Whatever it takes." Back at the office, Robert could barely concentrate on meetings. Sandra had to intervene several times when he simply stopped talking mid-presentation, his gaze lost on the city through the panoramic window. "You need to rest," she insisted after dismissing another group of investors. "You haven't slept properly. In days. You're still grieving, Robert." "Rest?" He laughed humorlessly. "How can I rest knowing that girl is starving, being hurt? Marina." His voice broke as he mentioned his daughter's name. "Marina would never forgive me if I gave up." That afternoon, a notification on his cell phone made him freeze. It was an alert from the facial recognition system he had installed on city cameras. Technology normally used for corporate security, now repurposed to find Sophia. "East Village," he murmured, memorizing the address. "Paul, I need you to go there now." The next few hours were torture. Robert paced his office, waiting for news. When his cell phone finally rang, his hand trembled so much he could barely answer. "I found them," Paul's voice sounded tense. "But the situation isn't good, Mr. Morgan. Mike is completely drunk, yelling in the street. Sophia is with him, but—" A heavy pause. "She's badly hurt." Robert felt his blood run cold. "I'm on my way." "No," Paul interrupted. "If he sees you, he'll run again. Let me try a different approach. I have contacts at CPS, I can—" The rest of the sentence was cut off by a distant scream, followed by the sound of breaking glass. The call dropped. Robert was already in the elevator when his cell phone rang again. It was an unknown number. "Mr. Morgan?" A professional female voice. "This is City General, East Wing. We have a minor being admitted to the ER, Sophia Oliveira. She asked us to call the crying man." The world seemed to spin around him. How is she?" "It's best if you come down here." The drive to the hospital was a blur of sirens and ignored traffic lights. Robert barely registered his driver's protests about speed limits. In his mind, images of Marina in her final moments mixed with Sophia's shy smile. The emergency room was crowded, but Robert bulldozed his way to the information desk. "Sophia Oliveira, where is she?" A nurse guided him down a dimly lit corridor. "She's dehydrated and malnourished," she explained in a low voice. "She has bruises all over her body, some bruised ribs. But what worries us most is the emotional trauma." Through the glass of the door, Robert saw Sophia lying on a gurney far too large for her small body. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped rhythmically. Her eyes were closed, but her small hands clutched the hospital sheet tightly. "Her uncle?" he asked, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Fled before the police arrived." "But—" The nurse hesitated. "There's something you need to know. Examining her documents, we discovered that Mike isn't actually Sophia's uncle. The papers are forged." Robert felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. All this time, that monster didn't even have legal rights over her. His hands, clenched into fists, nails digging into his palms. That's when a slight movement caught his attention. Sophia had opened her eyes and was watching him through the glass. Despite the bruises, despite the pain she must have been feeling, a small smile appeared on her lips. She raised her hand in a weak wave, and Robert felt hot tears stream down his face. There, in that hospital corridor, he made a silent promise. This time would be different. This time, he wouldn't lose anyone else. What he didn't know was that his battle was just beginning. As he watched Sophia drift back to sleep, exhausted by the medication, a shadow moved through the hospital corridors. Mike hadn't fled as far as everyone thought, and his eyes, clouded by alcohol and hatred, were already planning his next move. The night in the hospital dragged on endlessly. Robert refused to leave the hallway, even when the nurses suggested he go rest. Sitting in an uncomfortable chair, he watched Sophia through the glass, his heart aching every time she stirred restlessly in her sleep. "Mr. Morgan?" A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. A middle-aged woman with grey hair pulled back in a severe bun approached. "I'm Beatrice Shaw, the social worker assigned to Sophia's case." Robert straightened in his chair, instantly alert. "The forged documents from Mike—" "Yes, we're already aware of the situation," Beatrice interrupted, sitting beside him. "In fact, that's what we need to discuss. You've shown an unusual interest in this case." There was a note of suspicion in her voice that made Robert inwardly flinch. He knew how it looked. A millionaire CEO, recently bereaved, suddenly interested in a street girl. "It's not what you're thinking," he began, his voice hoarse. "Sophia? She helped me when I needed it most, without even knowing." Beatrice studied him silently for a few moments. "Go on." Robert closed his eyes, the memories of that terrible day flooding back. "My daughter Marina died a week ago. I was devastated, crying on the sidewalk, and Sophia," his voice broke, She offered to share her only piece of bread with me, thinking I was crying from hunger. He opened his eyes, meeting the social worker's gaze. How can I go on with my life knowing that girl, with all her kindness, is suffering? How can I honor my daughter's memory if I don't do something to help? Before Beatrice could answer, a sharp cry cut through the hospital's silence. Sophia had woken up in a panic, thrashing against the sheets, her eyes wide with terror. Robert shot up, but Beatrice stopped him from entering the room. Let the nurse calm her first. The next few minutes were torture. Through the glass, they watched as the nurse tried to soothe Sophia, who continued to tremble and mutter unintelligible words. Crying man. Her childlike voice finally became clear. I want the crying man. Beatrice hesitated for a moment before nodding to Robert. Go, but be careful. He entered the room silently, his heart breaking at the fear in Sophia's eyes. When she saw him, however, something in her expression changed. You came back, she whispered, tears streaming down her bruised face. Of course I came back, Robert replied softly, sitting on the edge of the bed, and I'm not going to let anyone hurt you again. Sophia reached out her small hand, seeking his. Promise. The word hit him like a punch to the gut. How many promises had he made to Marina? How many times had he sworn he'd find a cure, that she'd be okay? I promise, he answered, his voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. That's when he noticed Sophia was clutching something in her other hand, a crumpled piece of paper. What's that? She hesitated before showing him. It was a drawing made with hospital crayons. A house with a garden, as always, but this time there were only two people holding hands. It's us, she explained shyly. I know you're not my real dad, but sometimes I pretend I have a family again. Robert felt his heart shatter and mend itself all at once. Through the glass, he noticed Beatrice watching the scene with an enigmatic expression. The moment was broken by the sound of running in the hallway. A nurse hurried into the room. Mike was seen in the parking lot, she informed them in a low voice. Security is looking for him, but panic returned to Sophia's eyes instantly. She gripped Robert's hand tightly. Don't let him take me again, she pleaded. Please don't let him. Robert stood up, positioning himself between the door and Sophia's bed. His entire body trembled with anger and fear, not of Mike, but of the system that had allowed this situation to reach this point. Beatrice entered the room, her face tense. Mr. Morgan, we need to transfer Sophia to a temporary shelter as soon as she's discharged. It's standard procedure. No! Sophia cried, trying to sit up in bed. I want to stay with the crying man. The social worker observed the scene for a long moment before speaking again. There is a possibility, but you need to understand that it will be a long and difficult process. Your life will be thoroughly investigated. Your suitability as a potential guardian will be questioned, and considering your history as a businessman. I'll do whatever it takes, Robert interrupted, his voice filled with determination. Anything. The sound of glass shattering somewhere down the hall made everyone freeze. Sophia began to tremble uncontrollably, and Robert realized he needed to make a decision right then and there. What he didn't know was that this decision would trigger a series of events that would change not only his life and Sophia's, but also the way the city's adoption system worked. The battle he was about to face would be far greater than he could ever imagine. The New Horizons shelter was an old 3-story building with peeling paint and barred windows. Robert parked his car in front, watching as Sophia, still frail from her hospital stay, clutched a small backpack with the few clothes they had bought the day before. It'll only be for a little while, he promised, trying to sound more confident than he felt. In the meantime, I'll visit you every day. Sophia nodded silently, but her eyes said everything. It was the same look he had seen so many times in Marina's eyes during her treatment, Fear mixed with a resignation no child should ever know. Beatrice was waiting for them at the entrance. "Sophia will be in room 12, with 2 other girls her age," she explained, guiding them through the corridors. "Visiting hours are from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., weekdays only." 3 hours a day? Robert protested. "But those are the rules, Mr. Morgan." Beatrice cut in, her voice firm. "But not unkind. You're not a relative, nor her legal guardian yet. In fact, I'm already making an exception by allowing daily visits." Room 12 was small but clean, with 3 narrow beds. 2 girls paused their play with dolls when they entered, watching Sophia curiously. "This is your bed," Beatrice indicated. "I'll leave you to say goodbye." When they were alone, Sophia finally let the tears fall. "I don't want to stay here," she whispered. "What if Uncle Mike finds me again?" Robert knelt to her level. "He'll never get near you again," he promised, holding her small hands. "There are guards at the entrance, security cameras, and I've hired private security to watch the building. 24/7. "But what if—" "Sophia," he interrupted gently, "remember what you did for me that day, when you saw me crying?" She sniffled. "I gave you my bread." "Exactly. You shared the only thing you had with me, even without knowing me. Now it's my turn to take care of you. I won't give up, no matter how long it takes." A small smile appeared on her face. From her backpack, she pulled out a folded drawing, the same one of the house with the 2 people holding hands. "You can keep this," she said, "so you don't forget our promise." Robert felt his heart tighten. Carefully, he folded the drawing and put it in his wallet, next to the last photo he had taken with Marina. The goodbye was even harder than he had imagined. The sound of Sophia's suppressed sobs followed him down the shelter's corridors, making each step feel heavier than the last. Outside, Sandra was waiting for him in the car. "How is she?" she asked, concerned. "Scared? Alone?" Robert ran his hands over his tired face. "We need to speed up the process, Sandra. How long until the first hearing?" "About that?" She hesitated. "The press found out about the story. It's in this morning's papers." She handed him a tablet, displaying the headlines, "Millionaire in controversial adoption, bid after daughter's death," and "CEO known for mass layoffs now wants to adopt street girl." "Damn it," Robert muttered. It was exactly what he feared. His reputation in the corporate world had always been that of a cold, calculating man. The restructurings he had carried out in his companies had left hundreds unemployed. How could he convince a judge he could be a good father? His cell phone vibrated. A message from Beatrice. "We need to talk. It's about Sophia's past." The rest of the day was a blur of meetings with lawyers and social workers. Each new piece of information seemed to add more obstacles to the process. Sophia's history was murky. A birth certificate with inconsistencies, incomplete medical records, no school documents. At night, alone in his apartment, Robert stared out at the city through his window. Sophia's drawing lay on his desk, next to Marina's silver cross. 2 girls, 2 such different fates, 2 lives that had changed his forever. The phone rang, an unknown number. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Mike's voice, slurred with alcohol, made his blood run cold. "She's my meal ticket, you rich jerk. The welfare checks." Robert slammed the phone down, his hands trembling with rage. That was it. Mike kept Sophia only for the government benefits. The girl was nothing more than an income source for him. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He spent hours mentally replaying every detail of the adoption process, every possible obstacle, every argument he would need to build. He couldn't fail. Not this time. What he didn't know was that, at that very moment, in room 12 of the new Horizon's shelter, Sophia was also awake. Clutching her pillow, she whispered to herself the words he had said, turning them into a kind of prayer. He'll be back tomorrow, he promised, and this time will be different. But promises, as Robert knew all too well, are sometimes harder to keep than we imagine. And the shadows looming were far darker than any of them could foresee. Beatrice's office was crammed with files and case documents piled on every available surface. Robert sat in the only spare chair, his body tense with the anticipation of bad news. The social worker leafed through a yellowed folder, her expression growing increasingly serious. "What we've discovered about Sophia's past is disturbing," she began, adjusting her glasses. Her mother, Clara Oliveira, died 2 years ago under suspicious circumstances. But before that, Beatrice hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. She worked as a housekeeper in several high-end homes, including, Robert felt his stomach clench, at one of your subsidiary companies, Mr. Morgan, during the same period as the 2023 mass layoffs. The impact of that information hit him like a punch. Clara Oliveira. The name had meant nothing to him at the time, just another number on a spreadsheet of cuts, another story he had chosen not to know in the name of corporate restructuring. She lost her job during the cuts, Beatrice continued. After that, there are records of stays in shelters, applications for social assistance. That's when Mike showed up offering help. Robert closed his eyes, guilt consuming him. How many other Claras and Sophias had his decisions affected? How many lives had been shattered while he worried only about numbers and profits? Does the press know about this yet? Not yet, but it's a matter of time. Beatrice looked at him seriously. Mr. Morgan, I need to know. Are you seeking Sophia's guardianship out of guilt? The question caught him off guard. For a moment he was silent, truly reflecting. Was it guilt, remorse, or something deeper? When I lost Marina, he began, his voice hoarse, I thought I'd never be able to feel anything but pain again. Then Sophia appeared, offering her bread, her compassion. She gave me back something I didn't even know I'd lost, my humanity. Beatrice nodded slowly, making notes in her pad. And if she finds out about your indirect connection to her mother's tragedy? I'll tell her the truth, he replied without hesitation. All of it. Sophia deserves to know. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock on the door. It was Sandra, her face pale. Robert, you need to see this. On the tablet she held, a viral video was spreading across social media. Mike, visibly intoxicated, was giving an interview in front of the New Horizons shelter. He took my niece from me, he yelled at the cameras. A rich guy who destroyed thousands of families with his layoffs, including ours. Now he wants to buy her love with his dirty money. Robert felt his blood run cold. I need to go there. Sophia can't see this. Wait, Beatrice stopped him. There's one more thing you need to know. Analyzing Sophia's older documents, we found inconsistencies in the dates. The original birth certificate. Robert's cell phone rang, interrupting her. It was from the shelter. Mr. Morgan? The coordinator's voice sounded distressed. Sophia's gone. The world seemed to stop for an instant. What do you mean, gone? She was in the yard with the other children when we went to call them for lunch. The coordinator hesitated. We found this. A photo arrived on his phone, Sophia's drawing, the one of the house with two people holding hands, but now it was torn in half with a message written in childish handwriting. Sorry, crying man. I don't want to make you cry anymore. Robert shot up, his legs shaky. She must have seen the video. Someone showed it to her. We've already alerted the police, the coordinator informed him. But there's something strange. The security cameras show her leaving alone. It doesn't look like she was taken. Robert barely heard the rest. In his mind, he saw Sophia wandering the streets alone, scared and confused, thinking she had to protect him somehow. I'm going to look for her, he declared, already heading for the door. Robert, Beatrice called, her voice urgent. About what I was going to say. The dates on the birth certificate, there's a possibility, but he was already gone, leaving the sentence unfinished in the air. As he ran down the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest, he couldn't imagine that the real revelation, the one that would change everything, was still to come. Sophia hadn't simply run away. She was following clues from a past she didn't even know. A past that, ironically, connected her to Robert in a way no one could have predicted. The rain fell mercilessly on New York City as Robert scoured the streets of the East Village, his suit soaked, his Italian shoes ruined by the dirty puddle water. Every alley, every awning, every place a scared child might hide was meticulously checked. "Sophia!" His hoarse voice could barely be heard over the storm's noise. "Sophia, please!" The hours dragged on. Paul, the investigator, coordinated other search teams across the city. Sandra had activated every possible contact, but so far, nothing. That's when his cell phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. Morgan?" An elderly female voice. "This is Rosie from the diner near Fifth Avenue. You know, the one where you used to bring the little girl." Robert felt his heart leap. "Is Sophia there?" "No, but..." The lady hesitated. "She came by about 2 hours ago. She was soaked, poor. The thing asked for a glass of water and about her mother." "Her mother?" "Yes. Said she needed to find the place where her mother used to work. Said something about a big company with a garden at the entrance." Robert froze. He knew exactly which place that was, the headquarters of his subsidiary company, where Clara Oliveira had worked, where she had been laid off. "Thank you. Rosie, you don't know how much you've helped." 15 minutes. Later, he was parking in front of the imposing corporate building. The place was practically deserted at that time of night, with only a few security guards making their rounds. "A little girl," he described, showing a photo of Sophia on his phone. "Has anyone seen her?" The older guard adjusted his cap, thoughtful. "Now that you mention it, I did. She stood in the garden for a while looking at the flowers. Then she went in that direction." He pointed to a side street. Robert knew that street. At the end of it was a small, now abandoned park where employees used to have lunch. Where, he remembered with a pang in his chest, housekeepers used to take the children to play. The rain had eased to a fine drizzle when he reached the park. The rusty playground equipment creaked softly in the wind, creating a ghostly atmosphere. That's when he saw her. Sophia was sitting on a swing, completely drenched, her small legs dangling, not touching the ground. In her hands, she held something. An old photograph, so wet it was hard to make out the images. "Sophia," he called softly, so as not to startle her. She didn't turn around. "The lady at the shelter showed me Uncle Mike's video." Her voice was just a whisper. "He said you hurt my mom." Robert felt as if each word were a needle in his heart. Slowly, he approached and knelt in front of her, not caring about the mud staining his suit. "I wanted to remember her," Sophia continued, still not looking at him. "But I only have this old photo. I don't even really know what her face looked like anymore. Sophia, You know what's funniest, crying man?" She finally looked up, and Robert saw her eyes were red from crying. "When I try to remember my mom smiling, I can only see your daughter's face." Robert frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Sophia held out the soaked photograph. "I found this in my mom's old things, back in Uncle Mike's room. Look." With trembling hands, Robert took the photo. Through the water stains and deteriorated paper, an image began to form. A young woman, Clara, holding a small girl in her lap. Beside them, smiling at the camera, was Marina, his Marina, no more than 12 years old. "It can't be," he murmured, his hands trembling even more. "There are more photos," Sophia continued, pulling a crumpled envelope from her dress pocket. "And letters. Mommy kept everything. She wrote that Marina was like a big sister to me, that she took care of me while she worked, that it was our special secret." The world seemed to spin around Robert. Long-buried memories began to surface. Marina asking to accompany him to work during school holidays, her unusual interest in the employees' routines, the afternoon she spent studying in the staff lounge. "That's why I ran away," Sophia explained, her small voice trembling. "Not because I believed what Uncle Mike said, but because I needed to know. I needed to understand." Robert couldn't hold back any longer. He pulled Sophia into a tight hug, his tears mixing with the rain that still fell. "Forgive me," he sobbed. "Forgive me for not knowing sooner, for not protecting you and your mother when I could have." Sophia returned the hug with all the strength her small arms could muster. "I don't want you to cry anymore, Mr. Robert. Marina wouldn't like to see you sad like this." At that moment, under the fine New York drizzle, a man broken by grief and a girl scarred by life clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. What they didn't yet know was that this discovery, this connection through Marina, was just the beginning of an even greater truth, a truth that would change their lives forever. Beatrice's office seemed even more cramped with so many people gathered. Robert held Sophia in his lap, the girl finally sleeping after so many tense hours. Sandra organized the photos and letters on the table, while Paul, the investigator, took notes in his pad. "This changes everything," Beatrice murmured, examining the documents. The prior connection between the families, the emotional bond already established through Marina, but there's still something that doesn't fit. Robert noticed the social worker seemed uneasy, as if holding back information she didn't know how to share. "What is it, Beatrice?" She took off her glasses, rubbing her tired eyes. "Remember, I tried to tell you something about Sophia's birth certificate, about the inconsistencies in the dates." Sandra, who was analyzing one of the documents, suddenly turned pale. "Robert," her voice trembled, "look at this." It was an old letter, the paper yellowed with time. The handwriting was Clara's, Sophia's. Mother addressed to Marina. "My dearest Marina, I know I promised to keep it a secret, but it gets harder every day. Sophia asks about you so much, why you stopped visiting. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that her best friend who is actually her—" The rest of the letter was smudged, illegible. "There's more," Paul intervened, handing over an envelope he'd found among the documents. "Medical exams." Robert felt his heart race as he examined the papers. DNA tests dated 6 years ago. Marina's name appeared on one, along with Sophia's. "It can't be," he murmured, his hands shaking so much he almost dropped the documents. "Robert," Beatrice said softly. Marina was 16 when Sophia was born. She spent a lot of time at the company, especially in the wing where Clara worked. Records show she missed school for almost 2 months around that time, claiming health issues. The memory hit Robert like a lightning bolt. That turbulent period, when Marina started acting strangely, more withdrawn, when she asked to study at a boarding school upstate for a few months, when she came back different, more mature, more sad. "She was so young," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She must have been so scared, so alone. And I, too busy with the company to notice." Sophia stirred in his lap, her eyes slowly opening. "Are you crying again, Mr. Robert?" He tried to smile, wiping away his tears. "Sometimes we cry when we discover important things, little one." "What things?" she asked, curious. Robert exchanged a look with Beatrice, who nodded gently. "Sophia," he began, his voice choked. "Do you remember when you showed me that drawing? The one of the family you wanted to have?" She nodded. "What if I told you that you already have a family? That Marina—" His voice broke. "That Marina wasn't just your friend?" Sophia frowned, processing the information. "Mommy's letter, she said Marina had a secret that I couldn't know yet." "Marina was your sister, Sophia," Robert finally said, the words coming out like a painful sigh. Your older sister. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia remained completely still in his lap, her large brown eyes, so much like Marina's. How had he not noticed before? Fixed on his face. Is that why I always dreamed about her? Sophia whispered, even without really remembering her face. Robert hugged her tighter, unable to hold back his tears. Yes, my love, that's why. So, she hesitated, her small voice trembling. So you're your grandfather, he completed, feeling as if his heart would burst with love and pain at the same time. Sophia was silent for a long moment, her small hands clutching Robert's shirt as if afraid he might disappear. Now I understand, she said finally. Understand what, little one? Why you were crying so much that day. You hadn't just lost Marina, you'd lost us too. You just didn't know it. Her words hit Robert with overwhelming force. How many lost? Years. How many moments they could have shared. But before he could respond, Sandra let out a stifled gasp. There's one more thing, she said, holding out another document. Something about Clara, something that could complicate everything. Robert took the paper with his free hand, while the other continued to hold Sophia protectively. As he read, his face drained of color. Marina's secret wasn't the only one that needed to be revealed, and what he was about to discover about Clara, Sophia's mother, could completely change the course of this story. The document Sandra held was a police report dated 2 years ago. Robert read the words repeatedly, trying to absorb their meaning, while Sophia slept in his lap, exhausted after all the revelations. Clara's death wasn't accidental, he murmured, his voice trembling. She was investigating something at the company, something related to embezzlement of funds from the Social Benefits Department. Beatrice adjusted her glasses, leaning in to examine the report. According to this, she uncovered a fraud scheme, and the prime suspect was Mike, Robert completed, feeling a wave of nausea. He worked in the company's finance department at the time. He was one of those laid off during the cuts. Sandra, who was typing furiously on her laptop, looked up. I just accessed the old files. Mike wasn't just an ordinary employee. He coordinated the entire distribution of social benefits. When Clara started asking questions, he silenced her. Paul, the investigator, concluded grimly, and then took custody of Sophia using forged documents, probably to prevent anyone from investigating further. Robert hugged Sophia tighter, feeling her small, warm body against his chest. How had he not realized sooner? How had he allowed so much to happen right under his nose? Clara was trying to protect not only the employees, Beatrice said softly, reading more from the report. She discovered that Mike had access to information about Marina and Sophia. He was blackmailing her. The memories began to fit together, like pieces of a cruel puzzle. Marina's increasingly rare visits to the company, the fear in Clara's eyes in the last months before her death, the way she insisted on keeping Sophia close by at all times. She died trying to protect our family, Robert whispered, tears streaming silently, trying to protect Marina's secret, trying to save Sophia. A soft movement made him realize Sophia had awakened. Her large brown eyes watched him with a mixture of sleepiness and concern. "Grandpa," she said, the words still sounding strange and wonderful. "Why are you crying again?" Robert tried to smile through his tears. "Because your mother, Clara, was a very brave person, my love. She loved you so, so much. More than anything in the world," Sophia completed, as if remembering something distant. "She always said, oh, that..." Beatrice cleared her throat softly, drawing everyone's attention. "With this new evidence, we can reopen the case of Clara's death. And more importantly, we can prove that Mike never had legal rights over Sophia. He forged the custody documents. Which means..." Sandra began, hopeful. That there are no more legal obstacles for Robert to assume guardianship of Sophia. Beatrice, confirmed. She is legally his granddaughter, and with proof of Mike's fraud. She was interrupted by the shrill ring of her phone. Her face paled as she listened. Mike's been seen entering the building, she informed them, quickly hanging up. He's armed. Chaos erupted in the room. Sandra was already dialing 911. Paul positioned himself at the door, and Beatrice began to quickly gather the most important documents. But Robert barely registered the commotion around him. His world had shrunk to the little girl in his arms, who was now trembling slightly. "Sophia, look at me," he asked softly. "Remember what I promised you? That no one would ever hurt you again?" She nodded, clinging to him tighter. "I couldn't protect Marina," his voice broke. "I couldn't protect Clara, but you, my little one. I will protect you with my life, if necessary." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made everyone freeze. The doorknob began to turn slowly. Robert stood up, still holding Sophia, and positioned himself in the farthest corner of the room. His entire body trembled, not with fear, but with a fierce determination he had never felt before. In that moment, he was no longer the successful businessman, the man who had built an empire on cold, calculated decisions. He was just a grandfather, discovering for the first time the unconditional love Marina must have felt holding Sophia for the first time. The door opened. What happened in the next few minutes would forever change not only Robert's and Sophia's lives, but also the way justice would be served. Because sometimes true love, be it from a mother too young, a courageous guardian, or a grandfather who had just discovered his second chance, is capable of moving mountains. And in that small room, as fate knocked on the door, two souls broken by life were about to discover that sometimes the strongest families are those forged by pain, forgiveness, and above all, by a love that transcends blood and time. The door burst open with a crash, revealing Mike. His bloodshot eyes and trembling hands showed he was more intoxicated than usual. In his right hand, something metallic glinted menacingly. "Playtime's over," he snarled, staggering into the room. "The girl comes with me." Sophia buried her face in Robert's neck, trembling. He could feel her tears wetting his shirt, but her small voice whispered something only he could hear. "I'm not afraid of him anymore, Grandpa." That word, Grandpa, ignited something within Robert, a strength he didn't know he possessed, a protective instinct so strong it almost hurt. "Enough, Mike," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "We know everything. About the fraud at the company, about Clara, about the forged documents." Mike laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "So what? You think your proof is worth anything? I built this story for years. Years. The abandoned orphan, the devoted uncle." He took another unsteady step forward. "Do you know how much money she brought me? The benefits, the donations. She's my granddaughter," Robert cut in, each word laden with emotion. "My Marina's daughter." For a moment, Mike looked confused, as if his alcohol-dulled brain was slow to process the information. Then, his expression twisted into a mask of fury. "Lies!" he shouted. "More of your manipulations, you rich piece of crap, just like when you destroyed our lives with your layoffs." That's when Sophia lifted her head, her brown eyes, Marina's eyes, staring at Mike without fear. "He's not lying," she said, her voice small but firm. "I always dreamed about Marina, even without knowing she was my—" "Shut up!" Mike lunged forward, brandishing the metallic object. Paul, the investigator, chose that moment to act. With a swift movement, he tried to disarm Mike. In the ensuing confusion, the object, which was actually an old letter opener, clattered to the floor. Mike, unbalanced, stumbled backward. His face was red with anger and shame. "You don't understand," he stammered. I took care of her, in my own way, but I did." "Took care of her?" Robert couldn't contain the indignation in his voice. "You hurt her, let her starve, used her for money, and worse, you knew all along who she was, didn't you? That's why you blackmailed Clara." It was as if something snapped inside Mike. He collapsed to the floor, sobbing. "Clara, she found out everything. The fraud, the embezzlement, threatened to tell. I didn't want that to happen." "Did you hurt my mommy, Clara?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling slightly. The innocent question seemed to hit Mike like a punch. He looked up, his eyes filled with tears and remorse. "I just wanted to scare her," he murmured, "make her shut up." But she fell down the stairs. The sound of sirens began to drift in from the distance. Sandra had managed to discreetly call the police during the commotion. Robert felt Sophia stir in his arms. To his surprise, she asked to be put down. With small but determined steps, she approached Mike, who was now sobbing on the floor. "I forgive you," she said simply. Everyone in the room held their breath. Mike looked up, shocked. "Mommy Clara always said that forgiving makes you stronger than the person who hurt you," Sophia continued, "and I want to be strong like she was." Robert felt his heart swell with pride and love. In that moment, he saw so much of Marina in Sophia, the same compassion, the same inner strength his daughter had always shown. The police officers entered the room then, handcuffing a non-resisting Mike. He kept looking at Sophia as if seeing her for the first time. When the dust settled, Robert realized Sophia had returned to his side, holding his hand tightly. "Grandpa," she called softly. "Yes, my love." "Can we go home now?" Robert knelt to her level, his eyes welling up. "Yes, little one, now we can go home. And you know what?" "What?" "Marina would be very proud of you today, very proud indeed." Sophia smiled, that smile that so resembled her mother's. "She'd be proud of you too, Grandpa, because you didn't give up on me." Beatrice, who had been watching the scene with tears in her eyes, cleared her throat gently. "We still have some legal procedures ahead, but," she smiled, "I think this family has waited long enough to be together." What none of them knew was that this moment of forgiveness, this display of strength from a 6-year-old child, would be just the beginning of a new journey, a journey of healing, reconnection, and above all, love, because sometimes the greatest life lessons come from the smallest hearts, and sometimes it is precisely our deepest wounds that allow us to build the strongest bridges to the future. Marina's room had remained untouched for weeks after her death. Robert hadn't had the heart to change anything, as if altering any detail meant definitively accepting her departure. But now, standing at the doorway with Sophia holding his hand, he saw the space with new eyes. This was her room. Sophia asked softly, her eyes scanning every detail, the posters on the wall, the photographs, the books neatly arranged on the shelf. "Yes," Robert replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And now it can be yours too if you want." Sophia let go of his hand and entered the room slowly, as if treading on sacred ground. She stopped in front of the desk where a picture frame showed Marina smiling, hugging Robert. "She was so pretty," Sophia murmured, touching the photo with delicate fingers. "Sometimes, when I'm almost asleep, I remember her singing to me." Robert felt his heart ache. How many memories did Sophia carry without knowing? How many precious moments between mother and daughter had been stolen by time and circumstance? "I found this in Clara's papers," he said, taking an envelope from his pocket. Inside was an old photo, Marina, no more than 16, holding a newborn baby. Her eyes shone with love as she looked at little Sophia. Did she love me? The question came out as a broken whisper. Robert knelt beside her, holding her small hands. "More than anything in the world, my love, That's why she made sure Clara took care of you, to protect you, to give you a chance at a normal life." Sophia was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. Then, with the wisdom that sometimes only children possess, she said, "So I had 3 mothers. Marina, who gave me life, Mommy Clara, who took care of me, and..." "And?" Robert asked gently. "And Marina again, who sent you to find me when I needed you most." Her words hit him like a wave of pure emotion. Sandra appeared at the bedroom door, carrying a few bags. "The new clothes we ordered have arrived," she announced softly. "And," she hesitated, smiling, "there's one more surprise." In the living room, a large cardboard box moved slightly. Sophia approached curiously, and when Sandra lifted the lid, a golden retriever puppy jumped out, wagging its tail frantically. "Everyone deserves a new beginning," Robert explained, seeing Sophia's eyes fill with joy. "He was rescued from the street too." "Can I name her Marina?" Sophia asked shyly. Robert felt tears return to his eyes. "I think she would have loved that." The following weeks were a period of adjustment. Sophia had occasional nightmares, waking up calling for Clara or Marina. Robert learned to be patient, to be present, to understand that some wounds need time to heal. Beatrice visited regularly, helping Sophia process her feelings through therapy sessions. "She's dealing with a lot," she explained to Robert. "The loss of 2 mothers, the discovery of her true identity, the trauma of what she lived through with Mike." But there were also moments of pure joy. Like when Sophia discovered the piano in the music room and Robert realized she had inherited Marina's talent, or when she started school for the first time, coming home every day with excited stories and new drawings. One afternoon, Robert found Sophia in the garden, sitting on the grass with Marina, the dog, by her side. She was drawing in her new sketchbook, a gift he had bought after noticing her passion for art. "What are you drawing, little one?" She showed him the paper. It was the same house with a garden she used to draw, but now there were more details. Colorful flowers, a swing on the tree, and 3 figures holding hands. "That's Marina." She pointed to a figure with angel wings. "That's Mommy Clara." She indicated another figure, also with wings. "And this is us." She showed the last 2 figures, one large and one small, smiling. "That's quite a family," Robert commented, his voice thick with emotion. "The best part," Sophia said, leaning her head on his shoulder, "is that even though we can't see Marina and Mommy Clara, they're still our family. Here." She pointed to her heart. Robert hugged his granddaughter, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. Yes, there was still a long road ahead. Yes, there would be difficult days. But now they had each other. And sometimes, he thought, it is precisely in our greatest losses that we find our greatest gifts. Like a little girl who offered her bread to a tearful stranger, unaware she was starting a journey back home. Fall arrived in New York, painting the trees in the garden shades of red and gold. Robert watched from his office window as Sophia played outside with Marina, the dog who had become her inseparable companion. 3 months had passed since they began their new life together, and each day brought small discoveries, small miracles. "Mr. Morgan," Sandra entered quietly, carrying an old box. "We found this in the company archives. I think you need to see it." Inside the box was a diary, its cover worn with time. The name Clara Oliveira was written on the first page in neat handwriting. "Where?" "It was stored in her old locker," Sandra explained. "Along with this." She handed him a yellowed envelope, addressed to Robert, dated 2 years ago, just days before Clara's death. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope. The letter inside had never been sent. "Dear Mr. Morgan, by the time you read this, I will likely be gone. I discovered too much, dug too deep, and now I fear the consequences. But there is something you need to know. Something I promised Marina I would keep secret until it was safe to reveal. Sophia is not just your granddaughter. She is so much more. And than that, a joyful shout from the garden interrupted his reading. Sophia was chasing a butterfly, her brown hair shining in the sun, so much like Marina's. "Grandpa!" she called, waving. "Come see what I found!" Robert put the letter in his pocket, promising himself he would finish reading it later. He went down to the garden, where Sophia was waiting for him with something in her hands. "Look!" She opened her small fingers, revealing an old locket. It was buried near the rose bush. Robert's heart skipped a beat. That locket, he knew it well. It had been a gift from his wife Helen to Marina when she turned 15. "Where exactly did you find this, Sophia?" She led him to a bed of white roses, Marina's favorites. "I was digging to plant the seeds Aunt Sandra gave me, and it was here." Robert opened the locket carefully. Inside, besides the photo of a teenage Marina, there was a small, folded piece of paper he had never seen before. "What is it?" Sophia asked, curious. "I don't know, little one, but I think your mother left it here on purpose." The paper was protected by a thin plastic film, preserving Marina's handwriting. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means you found your way back home, back to her. I know you must be confused, talented, but there's so much you still don't know. Clara wasn't just our housekeeper, she was much more. And Sophia is the greatest gift fate could have given us. One day you'll understand why. Take care of her, Dad, as I know you would have taken care of me if you had known the truth. And from the beginning, with love, Marina." "Grandpa?" Sophia's voice brought him back to the present. "Why are you crying again?" He knelt on the grass at her level. "Sometimes we cry from love, you know. So much love it doesn't fit in our hearts." Sophia smiled, that smile that was so hers and yet so Marina. "Like when I dream about her." "What do you mean, little one?" "Sometimes I dream that Marina is hugging me, telling me stories, and when I wake up, my heart is so full it feels like it's going to explode." Robert pulled her into a tight hug, smelling the soft scent of her hair, a scent that inexplicably reminded him of his late wife. That's when he noticed something curious. On the back of the locket was an inscription he had never seen before, words engraved in tiny letters that made his heart skip a beat. "To my sister, with eternal love." The pieces began to fit together. In his mind, forming a puzzle he had never imagined existed. Clara's unfinished letter in his jacket pocket seemed to burn, holding the last part of a secret that would change everything once more. Sophia, oblivious to the discovery, continued, playing with Marina, her musical laughter echoing through the garden. Robert watched her, noticing for the first time small details that had previously gone unnoticed. Details that told a much larger story than he could ever have imagined. And as the autumn sun gilded the fallen leaves, he knew he was about to discover the last and most surprising truth about his family. A truth that began with two sisters, a secret kept for decades, and a love that transcended generations. That night, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Robert sat in his study with 3 items before him: Clara's diary, the unfinished letter, and the locket with its mysterious inscription. His hands trembled as he opened the diary to the first page. "March 20th, 1999. Today, I discovered the truth about my adoption. Mum finally told me everything on her deathbed. I have a twin sister, separated from me at birth. A wealthy family adopted her while I went to a humbler home. Her name is..." Robert felt the air leave his lungs. The name that followed was that of his late wife, Helen, Marina's mother. "It can't be," he murmured, the diary pages trembling in his hands. But it was. Clara continued her account, explaining how she discovered that her twin sister had married a promising businessman, Robert Morgan, how she purposefully got a job at his company to be close to her niece, Marina, how fate had woven a complex web that was now, finally, beginning to make sense. With his heart pounding, Robert picked up Clara's unfinished letter. Sophia is not just your granddaughter. She is so much more than that. She is the link that unites our families, that corrects a separation that should never have happened. When Marina found out she was pregnant, it was to me she ran first. Not just because I was her confidant at work, but because she already knew the truth, that I was her aunt, her mother's twin sister. Marina made me promise to take care of Sophia, to protect her until it was safe to reveal the whole truth. She knew she was too young, that the scandal could destroy everything you had built. But more than that, she wanted her daughter to grow, up free from the weight of the Morgan name, free to be whoever she wanted to be. What no one could have predicted was that I would fall in love with that little one as if she were my own daughter. In Sophia, I saw not only my great niece, but a piece of the sister I was never able to truly know. Sandra entered the study silently, finding Robert with his face bathed in tears. "Did you know?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I found out a little while ago, when I was organizing the old documents," she replied softly. "There's one more thing. You need to see." She handed him an old photograph, yellowed with time. In it, two identical baby girls slept side by side in a hospital nursery. On the back, a date and two handwritten words, "Sisters, always." "That's why Sophia looks so much like Marina," Robert murmured. "It's not just because she's her daughter. It's Clara's blood too, the same blood as my wife." A soft noise at the door made him look up. Sophia stood there in her unicorn pajamas, hugging her stuffed bunny. "I couldn't sleep," she said quietly. "I dreamed about Marina again. And Mommy, Clara." They were smiling, holding hands. Robert opened his arms and Sophia ran to him, snuggling into his lap as she had done so many times in recent months. "Sophia," he began softly, "did you know that sometimes love is so big it finds paths we never even imagined existed?" She nodded, her eyes, Marina's eyes, Clara's eyes, his wife's eyes fixed on him. "Your mommy, Clara. She was very special, more special than we thought. She was the twin sister of your other grandmother, my wife who is in heaven with Marina." Sophia was very quiet for a moment, processing the information. Then, with that wisdom only children sometimes possess, she said, "Is that why I feel so much love inside me? Because I have two mums and two grandmas watching over me from up there?" Robert hugged her tighter, letting the tears flow freely. "Yes, my love, that's exactly why." "And you know what's coolest?" she continued, her eyes shining. "Now I understand why Marina chose Mommy Clara to take care of me. Because they were family, just like we are now." At that moment, hugging his granddaughter, the miracle that tied together all the loose ends of his story, Robert finally understood the true meaning of family. It wasn't just about blood or names. It was about love, forgiveness, and the mysterious paths fate chooses to heal old wounds. What he didn't know was that there was still one last revelation to be made, one that was hidden at the back of Clara's diary in its final pages, waiting for the right moment to come to light. Spring arrived in New York, covering the garden of the Morgan mansion with flowers of every color. Robert was sitting on the swing he had installed on the large tree, the same one Sophia had so often drawn in her dreams of family. In his hands, he held the last pages of Clara's diary, those he had saved to read when his heart was ready. "Dearest Sophia, if you are reading this, it means you are finally home, with your grandfather, where you always should have been. There is one last story I need to tell you, my love. a story about three women who loved you more than anything in the world. Your grandmother Helen, my twin sister, knew about me. In the last months of her life, when the illness was already consuming her, she sought me out. It was she who arranged my job at the company so I could be close to Marina. Take care of her, she asked me on her deathbed. Take care of our girl. And I did. I watched Marina grow, blossom, become the extraordinary young woman she was. When she found out she was pregnant with you, it was as if fate had come full circle. There I was, repeating the promise I had made to my sister, now to your mother. Take care of her, Marina asked me the day you were born, until it's safe for her to come home. What no one could have foreseen was the overwhelming love I would feel for you, my little one. In you, I saw not only my great niece, but a piece of all of us, Helen's strength, Marina's kindness, and something completely your own, a light that illuminated everyone around you. I know that when you read this, I will already be gone. But I want you to know that every moment with you was a gift. Every smile, every hug, every mommy you called me will be treasured forever in the most sacred place there is, love. And there is one last thing. At the bottom of the music box I gave you, the one you loved so much and Mike never found, there is a key. It opens a safe deposit box at the bank where I kept something precious for you, something your mother Marina left before she passed. With eternal love, Clara, your second mother and your great aunt. Robert barely had time to wipe his tears when he heard Sophia's voice. Grandpa, look what I found. She came running through the garden, holding an old music box that Sandra had recovered from Mike's old apartment. The same box mentioned in the letter. This was inside, Sophia exclaimed, showing a small golden key. 2 hours later, they were at the bank, opening a safe deposit box that had waited years for this moment. Inside, there was an envelope and a small velvet box. The envelope contained a letter from Marina. My little Sophia, if you are reading this, it means you have found your way back home to the father I love so much. I know you must have thousands of questions, doubts, maybe even a little anger. But I want you to know that every decision I made was with you in mind. You were my greatest act of love. So young, so scared, I could have taken another path. But when I saw you for the first time, I knew you were an angel God had sent to unite us even more. Me, Aunt Clara, Grandma Helen, whom you never met, but who blessed us from heaven. In the little box that accompanies this letter is something very special. The necklace Grandma Helen gave to Aunt Clara the day they were reunited. Two halves of a heart that separated for decades finally came together. Now it's yours, so you never forget that true love always finds its way back home. With eternal love, your mother, Marina. Sophia opened the little box with trembling hands. Inside, a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a heart, broken in two and then rejoined, a thin gold line marking where the two parts met. Grandpa, she called softly, can you help me put it on? As he fastened the clasp of the necklace around Sophia's small neck, Robert felt as if all the women in that extraordinary story were there with them. Helen, his beloved wife, with her gentle smile. Clara, the guardian of so many secrets and so much love. And Marina, his courageous Marina, who had left the most precious of gifts. You know, Sophia, he said, his voice thick with emotion, sometimes life takes us down paths we don't understand. It hurts us, separates us. But in the end, love brings everything back together, she completed, touching the necklace reverently. Just like this heart, right? It was broken, but now it's whole. Robert hugged her, feeling her small heart beat against his. Exactly, my love. Exactly. That night, Sophia fell asleep holding the necklace, a serene smile on her face. In her room, Marina's old room that was now truly hers, the drawings on the wall told a story of family, love, and redemption. And Robert, watching his granddaughter sleep, finally understood that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our greatest sorrows. That sometimes a heart must break for another to become whole again. Outside, in the moonlit garden, the white roses, Marina's favorites, swayed gently in the night breeze, and if one listened very carefully, they might swear they heard the distant echo of women's laughter, 3 generations of love, finally reunited in the eternity of the heart.